And we're joined now by the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Texas Republican Representative Mike McCaul. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
I have a lot to get to with you, but I want to start on the National Defense Authorization Act, which passed the Republican-controlled House, and it drew a lot of attention this week because of the social policy issues attached to it. So this is a bill. It pays military personnel. It does things that are necessary for national security. Once this goes to the Senate, they're going to chop out all those things. You know that.
Right.
Comes back to you in the House. Are you confident that Republicans can get this necessary piece of legislation through without having to turn to Democrats to help you get it over the finish line?
You know, we saw this actually when the Democrats had the majority. They passed a very partisan, NDAA bill, went over to the Senate. I'm a conferee to the conference committee. And traditionally, the more, the more partisan amendments get stripped out. At the end of the day, this always ends up as a bipartisan bill. But there were some certain policies, like, for instance, the Hyde Amendment since 1980, not to fund taxpayer abortions that, our members felt was very important to put in there.
Well,
I think that's one that will survive.
Well, you're talking about the provision that would restrict funding to allow service members to travel.
And pay expenses, yeah.
But it doesn't in any way, the Pentagon policy, fund abortions.
Well, I wish they hadn't.
Or fertility services.
Well, they actually kind of started this argument. And look, this is a process. We had a lot of amendments. Our members needed that vote. And I do think at the end of the day, we come together as a conference. And it will be a bipartisan bill. I think there's nothing more important than our national defense and our military. We give the largest pay raise in 20 years. We upgrade our triad system, our nuclear capability, hypersonics, a lot to counter China, and particularly in Taiwan. So it's vitally important we not politicize this bill at the end of the day. And I feel very confident we'll have a bipartisan bill coming out.
Okay, because you did vote to eliminate the diversity offices at the Pentagon, to deny transgender troops coverage for hormone therapy, for this restriction on funding for people to get reproductive services, including fertility treatments and abortions, to travel. None of that, you think, ends up?
Well, because that goes against...
Because none of those things will get Democratic.
Well, it goes against, since 1980, we haven't funded anything that goes towards taxpayer, abortions. I think some of the policies on culture that the Defense Department has instituted has caused problems within our own military. Recruitment is an all-time low now. After Afghanistan, and then to watch these videos that these trained, say SEALs have to watch, injecting their own social, moral policies. Let's make it about readiness and our ability to fight a war.
Well, yeah, and that's why the defense secretary said 1 in 5 troops are now female, and that what he put this policy in to be able to do is for them to travel to get things that aren't covered in the states they're living. So shouldn't all troops, regardless of where they're stationed, get the same treatment? Like, why penalize them for living in Texas?
Well, they're free to travel to another state.
They'd be penalized. They'd have to take
have an
time
abortion,
off.
Just not taxpayer expense.
They'd have to take the time off and the like. And so that would impact their ability to do their jobs, arguably, right, if they have to go on leave. But anyway, I want to also ask you about one of the things that was in there, or not in there, but many conservative members of your caucus wanted it to, and those are restrictions on funding for Ukraine. What does that indicate about what Republicans will get over the finish line in the fall in terms of an actual supplemental to help Ukraine?
Right. Well, you know my position on Ukraine. We should have, a year ago, been putting in the weapons we're putting in just now.
Right.
For victory, not just to survive. There were several Ukraine amendments. They all failed. And I would say the majority of Republicans voted to support Ukraine. At the end of the day, the Reagan Institute did a great poll that showed that over 70% of Republicans support Ukraine. I think that was reflected in our vote. Yes, we had about 70 members that voted against it, but I do think when it comes back, you're going to see a more bipartisan support for things like our efforts in Ukraine, particularly as we're in the counteroffensive. To me, it's very dangerous to have these amendments when Ukraine is in the crossfire trying to push the aggression of Russia back in the counteroffensive.
You're talking about amendments like what Marjorie Taylor Greene was trying to attach.
Correct.
And Republicans did oppose this thing that
we did, and it failed, and I think that's good news.
You've been pushing for longer range missile systems like ATACMS. Do you have enough funding in this current allotment or what you can put together in the fall to continue the pace of weapons?
Sure. It was already appropriated in the supplemental last year, the $90 billion. I mean, it's a drawdown authority. We have ATACMS. So I have great sources on the ground, and they're telling me right now, because of the mines and the fortifications, that what they need, the cluster munitions are going to help with, killing Russians in the field. However, they need the longer range artillery to hit the depots, the energy, the logistical supply lines. They don't have that, and they don't have air cover. And that's really important here, because the F-16s were held back so long by the administration and the pilot training that they don't have what they need to win in this counteroffensive, and it's really sad.
I want to ask you quickly about Iran. You've been vocal in asking the administration for a briefing on the presidential envoy, Rob Malley, and why he is suspended. Do you have any promise that you'll get it, that you'll get information?
Well, I sent a letter. We were rebuked. We had been given no answer about his status. Remember, this is the top negotiator to Iran on one of the most, a nuclear weapons program, highest classified secrets. So we are giving a deadline of July 25th to have, the diplomatic security and management secretary come in and brief us in a classified space. Margaret, I can't tell you how important this is, because if he somehow, worst case scenario, if he transferred intelligence and secrets to our foreign nation adversaries.
But there's no proof of that at this point.
There is no proof of that. But if he did, that would be treason in my view.
Unfortunately, I have to leave it there because we have a hard out here, but more to talk to you about always. We'll be right back.
Thanks, Margaret.